Yo everyone, Paul here, back with another video, and in today's episode we're going to be editing your images. If you're in Victoria, we're at that half stage of the lockdown. We've got 3 more weeks to go until freedom, and I've ran out of images to post and edit and re-edit. I've re-edited so many photos that it's not even funny. I knew I wanted to make this video because I'd be running out of content very shortly. So a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to my friends on Instagram to ask if they can submit some images, and we got an influx of great images to work with, everything from really nice landscapes to portraits and everything that falls in between. So we got a whole lot to play with. Now, as an added bonus, one of my friends, Julian, who was actually meant to be submitting an image, by pure coincidence simultaneously was part of a bigger FFA competition. I believe it's called Co-Create FFA. A bunch of really talented photographers have put this collection of images together for us to edit. I'm going to be leaving all the details of all the photographers who submitted images and a link to all the Co-Create FFA in case you wanted to take part in that. Normally in Lightroom, I'll typically try to edit all my images fairly similar. In this, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and just maybe try some different styles out. I don't know what's going to happen. We're just gonna see. So first up is my good friend Tommy. He's a fantastic Melbourne-based photographer. The portraits are just out of this world, and I was kind of lucky enough to get one of his images to start editing. So when I first like to edit images, I'm going to come down to the calibrations, make sure that's all looking like where I want it. Now for this, I kind of got an idea in my head what I'm going to go for. Somewhat muted in the color palettes, maybe a bit contrasty, adding some really nice grain in there to give that kind of filmic vibe. Typically what I do when I'm in my calibrations tab, if I'm pushing my reds one way, I'll be pushing the blues the other way. -7, bring down the reds a bit, maybe -10 or 11. We'll keep it on 10. And then we'll jump down to the blues here and go -27, we'll see how that looks. And as you see, what's happening here is we're just adjusting the colors ever so slightly. So if we toggle this on and off, you can just see it's just pushing the colors ever so slightly in a different direction, so then we can manipulate the image a lot easier. So let's just jump into the tone curve. Let's make sure we're here. Here we go. I'm gonna lift the shadows a little bit. There we go. Nothing too crazy. I think I'm gonna try and mute a lot of the highlights in this. So what I'm planning to do on the tone curve in each channel, I'm gonna put a pretty heavy S curve. So it's really handy in one of the new versions of Lightroom. If you want to copy your settings from one tone curve to the next, say across the different channels, you can. All you need to do is right click on it, copy the settings, and then paste them across the different channels. So pretty happy with that so far. A little bit too contrasty, a little bit too saturated for this kind of style that I'm going for in this particular image. So we're going to come down to the HSL tab and start playing around with the colors to see what happens. So normally I'd be a bit more precise on this, but because I'm not editing in a particular style that I normally do, I'm just basically looking at the image and dragging the slider ever so slightly to kind of get the desired effect I want. Just toggle that on and off. See, we've made a massive difference. Now I'm going to jump down into split toning. Now here I'm not going to do anything too drastic, just a little color to the shadows. Now if we look at the histogram here, we notice the highlights are kind of a little bit blown out here. So we're going to go jump up to the basics tab, and I am going to give this a somewhat muted feel in the highlights. I'm going to minus the clarity a little bit, maybe -9. I'm going to bring the vibrance down here, -7. Nah, I think it's a little bit warm, so we're going to bring the Kelvin down a little bit, maybe 6200 roughly. Now it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with where this image is. If we look at it before and after, that has came a long way. Now what I do want to do is kind of add my own little flair. For me, what I like in portraiture is really nice soft highlights and almost that dreamy feel. And the way that I like to do this, gradient filter along with the luminance filter on it. So whatever is red, it will be affected by the mask. So if we click that off and then if we pull that down, you'll notice it's only being applied to the brightest parts of the map. And this is where we can come in and then fine tune the mask essentially. So after tweaking it a little bit more to get it to exactly the way I wanted it, this is the image we ended up with. Thanks Tommy for giving me one of your images to edit. I hope I've done it justice. So moving on to the next image, and it's from Kyle Meshna. And Kyle is one of my top boys when it comes to photography. He consistently putting out amazing content, fantastic photographer. Please go and check him out if you haven't already. Thank you very much for submitting an image, Kyle. Really appreciate it. So we've got a drone image here. Typically drones are a little bit more tricky to deal with. I do believe this is taken on the Mavic Air 2. All is a lot easier to edit. So as we did in the first image, we're just gonna play around with the calibrations. Start on the tone curve. Not gonna do anything too crazy on this one. Maybe just a subtle S curve. So what I love about this image is that we got the fog coming in from the right hand side, and then we kind of got this dark area. But I think we're going to go for that kind of moody, desaturated feel for this one. I think that's what we're gonna do. So what I want to try to emphasize on this photo is the light coming in on the top right hand side and then the darkness on the bottom left. So after playing around with it, we got an image that looks like this. Not the most complicated edit, but I think it looks pretty decent. Thank you very much, Kyle, for submitting and giving me an image to play around with. Appreciate it, man. I hope I've done it some justice. Let's move on to the next one. Firing through these. So next up is my friend Bradley. Bradley is a talented photographer, filmmaker, who submitted a bunch of different images, but this is kind of the one I've settled on. What attracted me to this image over some of the other ones that he submitted is just the leading lines, the beautiful light coming in from the left-hand side, and I know there's a few things that I can do to this. As far as the color's going to go, I'm not going to go for like anything too crazy, so we might just kind of skip past some of these points. Basically just give it a little bit of the fade and the shadows, tweak the blues and the greens and the yellows to kind of make them a little bit more lush. What I really want to do with this image is accentuate the light that's coming off. So as I did in the first image, I've got a bunch of presets already made in terms of local adjustments. So I've got the radial filter, and we're just going to kind of emulate some sun. Now again, it's a little bit too much when we first implement it, but then we apply it and then tweak it, and then we're gonna go work it from there. And I just want to be super soft light that's coming in and then trickling down here. Also going to do is to add to this kind of radial filter, paint in some light here, very harshly, very crudely, sorry. And you're probably thinking, Paul, this looks terrible. And now what I want to do is, you can kind of see if we zoom in here, the lights somewhat hitting off the edge of the tree, and I really like that, but I kind of want to accentuate it a little bit. And then I'm going to paint in over the field. Again, too drastic, but this is the beautiful thing of the range mask, and then using luminance on it. You can really dial in where the light is affected. So the whole idea about making these adjustments and just making small incremental changes, and then when they build all up, come to a really nice effect. If we look at the before and after, there is quite a bit of difference. So Bradley, thank you very much for submitting an image. I really appreciate it. It really helped me out there. Fantastic image. I hope I've not pushed it too far. I'm kind of in this little editing mindset. You ever get that when you're just editing too much and then you come back to some of the edits you've just done and then you're just like, what have I done? Next up is my friend Andy, who's a Scottish photographer who is also based in Melbourne. Andy is a fantastic street photographer. Please go and check out some of his stuff. With this image, I know exactly what I want to be doing. I want to play a lot with the light, maybe in almost black and white. So I'm currently developing some presets at the moment, and I kind of want to give it a test out. I think it's a little bit too black and white. The shadows are pumped up here a little too much. So we're going to reduce that. Now, I know instantly when I look at this image, I'm not really happy with all these lines. They're not exactly straight. So we're going to head down to the transform tab, hit the vertical thing. At this point, we're going to really need to crop in, so we're going to go for a 4x5 crop. What I would probably do is kind of accentuate the sun that's coming out of here, and so again, I'll use one of my radial filters that I've already got made up. So after we've taken it into Photoshop, removed all the little distracting elements, cropped it in a little bit, end up with an image that looks like this. Now, a lot of these images are pretty stylized, and it's the way I like to edit my images. So I'm pretty happy with that. Thanks again, Andy, for submitting an image. Really appreciate that. So the next image we got up is from a friend, TK North, a Sydney-based photographer. Highly recommend, if you haven't already, go check him out. In this image, we've got an elderly Asian man shoveling snow from his restaurant, I think. Really nicely captured, got all the snow frozen perfectly in place. As most of the images that we edit from scratch, we're going to start off in the calibrations tab. Again, ever so slightly with these adjustments, but it just puts us in a better place to start editing this image. What we're going to do here is jump across into the tone curve, create a subtle S-curve, and to create a little bit more depth and dimension throughout the image, we're going to copy that across the different channels of the tone curve. Notice here we're jumping back and forth between the basic tab and the tone curve. Just try to get those tones exactly right. And as always, going to crop it for a 4x5. So what I think is missing from this image is a little bit of grain to tie it all together. Make it a slightly more vintage vibe. This is where it started, and this is my edit on it. Fairly big difference, very stylized again. So thanks TK for submitting an image, I really appreciate it, man. Moving swiftly on to the next image is from a friend, Julian. Now you might remember from the start of the video that I mentioned one of the guys is part of a larger FFA co-create competition that they've just started. This is what has given us access to some other photographers' photos that we can edit during this video. Now we've got this epic picture. They're taking in the Black Spurs. The Spurs is one of my favorite spots to go to and shoot. Got this beautiful foggy, misty morning with the light just coming in through the trees. Got a good image to work with here. As we do in most images, we're going to start in the calibration tab, tweak everything so it's that much easier to edit. I'm thinking for this, we're going to put a pretty heavy fade. Now with a lot of these images, not a lot of them need that much tweaking. I think this is one of them. It just needs the light shaping a little bit. So what I'm thinking is we're going to accentuate the fog just a little bit. Obviously this is a little bit too drastic. Now we're going to add some color to this, bring down the exposure a little bit. Now we're going to use some graduated filters to really shape the light in this image. What to do is accentuate some of the dark areas coming around. Again, ever so slightly, we're just adding little bits here and there, playing around with the image for a little bit. I've ended up with an image that looks like this. If we look at the before and after, I didn't really do that much. I just really accentuated the image. I just added a little bit more fog in there, softened that light a little bit to give that kind of dreamy-esque feel. Thanks again, Julian, for submitting an image. I really appreciate it, man. So as I've mentioned, some of the images that we're going to have access to are part of the Co-Create FFA. My good friend Julian's a part of, and a bunch of other talented photographers and filmmakers. So this video might be getting a little bit on in time. So I have picked 5 images from the Co-Create FFA competition. We're not going to go through them. I'm just kind of show you the before and after, but I did want to focus on this one, mainly because I've not edited a photo like this before, and I kind of want to see what information I can recover to see if it can make it a really nice image that we can post on Instagram. So the photographer we're going to use is Ben Savage, really fantastic content creator. Without me rambling anymore, let's just jump into the edit. Now as you see, we have just basically got a big blue blob in the middle of blue. Now the idea with these first adjustments is that we're just getting the image to a point where we can then edit it. So I know the first thing we need to do is we need to dehaze the hell out of this video. So we're going to, again, not good, so we're going to pull down the vibrance just a little bit here. Perfect. And now we're going to jump down to the HSL tab where we're going to push and shift the colors to exactly where we want it. I'm going to tackle this photo slightly differently to how I've done most of them. What I'm going to edit this photo is using basically localized adjustments and then just honing in on the shadows and the highlights and then trying to edit them separately. So I'm going to come and start with the shadows, and then I'm going to drop that over everything, similar to what we've done in the rest of the videos. Hit luminance. I just want to affect the darkest parts of the image, bringing some contrast back into it. So what I'm going to do, right click on here, duplicate that, and then come over to soft highlights. So I kind of want that soft, almost underwater dreamy feel. I am pretty happy with where it is at the moment. Now I'm going to jump back into the HSL tab and then just tweak it ever so slightly. Similar method that I've used throughout the rest of the video. I'm going to use the graduated filters to shape some of the light, accentuate some of the darker parts to help really frame up our subject. Perfect. I think that was looking pretty good. I'm going to leave it at that. And now if you look at the before and after, we can see we've brought it a hell of a way. Now, I'm not going to take you through the rest of the edits, but I'm going to show you the before and afters. So here are those now. First of all, I'd like to thank all my friends who have submitted an image for me to tackle and put my own spin on it. I really appreciate it, and I hope I've done it some form of justice. A big shout out to Julian and all the creators that are doing the FFA competition. I know for a fact during this entire 2020 lockdown period, competitions like this has really brought us through and helped us collaborate on a global scale. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all those YouTube things. But until next time, guys.